Cody Rhodes is set to defend the WWE Undisputed title against Kevin Owens at Bash in Berlin in a couple weeks, and there's been a lot of debate and even criticism regarding how Owens reacted whenever Cody tried to give him that title shot. Owens saying that he didn't feel like he deserved it. He brought up his win-loss record, all those different things. But as I said on the reaction show last week, I think that's clearly just leading you towards that, escalating frustration for Kevin Owens and maybe how Cody is sort of going about being the WWE Undisputed Champion. And I think you're going to see that come out even more here over the next couple of weeks to get to that match. And then eventually, we know there's a bigger match for Cody that's going to happen probably after Bash in Berlin, and we start to make that road to Bad Blood, Survivor Series, and all that over the next couple months. But one of the other things that's being talked about a lot is Cody's reign itself. And there have been a lot of people talking about how this has maybe felt pretty underwhelming in terms of Cody winning the championship at WrestleMania 40 and what's happened since then, right? He's had a couple matches against AJ Styles. He's had a match against Logan Paul. And you've had, some of those title defenses, Solo Sikoa at SummerSlam, which we talked a lot about that. There just weren't many people who believed that Solo was ever going to beat Cody. No one believed Logan Paul was going to beat Cody. No one believed that AJ Styles was going to beat Cody. And that sometimes is an issue, right? When you have somebody who wins a championship as a babyface, and then you try to convince people that there is someone in line that is going to beat them soon. And that's just not an easy thing to do. But I think there is a lot that goes into this, and I think it's time that we do have this discussion on what exactly has stood out with this Cody reign, maybe what has gone right, what has gone wrong. And I'll tell you, I think the place to start is WrestleMania 40, because if you really think about it, right, this was really always going to be the peak of the Cody Rhodes WWE Undisputed title win. It was going to be the moment that he was handed that championship from referee Charles Robinson. And you could say, well, it doesn't always have to be that way. But when you think about the magnitude of the story, something that was many years in the making, something that took Cody Rhodes from WWE to AEW and back to WWE to get this one big moment, it's always going to be almost impossible to replicate that at any point in the future. And so everything is going to undoubtedly feel like a little bit of a letdown after you go from having this huge moment that everything has been built around. There were so many people invested in the story that it was always going to be difficult to immediately capitalize on that right afterward. Now, if Cody would have went immediately into a feud with The Rock or something like that, then maybe you keep that momentum going, right? But you go from everything with The Rock and Roman Reigns and the Bloodline to then, no knock on these guys, but AJ Styles and Logan Paul were not pushed, right, to that level of those guys before them. Like, they were not pushed to the level of The Rock and Roman Reigns. People were not as invested in the story because they looked at it as though, all right, these are sort of your normal paint-by-the-numbers title defenses for Cody to give him some wins to then get him to the bigger stuff, which the biggest thing would be Solo Sikoa at SummerSlam, prompted the return of Roman Reigns, and now we're off and running for Cody into another direction, which will likely eventually lead to that match with Randy Orton sooner rather than later. But if you look at it from that standpoint, it was always going to be tough to just go from this, the huge high of Cody having this moment at WrestleMania 40, to being able to keep that thing rolling at that same level. It was always going to feel like a drop-off. And again, I'm not saying it always has to be that way, but even look back to like the Daniel Bryan situation, right at WrestleMania 30. All the yes movement, everything led to that one big moment of him winning the championship, finally getting his opportunity. And yes, there were a variety of things that affected that, whether it was, injuries, different feuds, but it was kind of the same way. You could never sort of get that same type of thing. And again, I'm not comparing the two because injuries were involved and all that, but you get my point. When you get the babyface who finally gets the big moment that people have been clamoring for, sometimes for years, the way that it's been with Cody, this was going to happen. However, it's not just about this, though, because there are some things that you can look at and say, well, how could it have been better? The thing is, with the brand split, it has its limitations. It always has, always will. Because here's the thing, right? What did we say right after WrestleMania 40? If you guys go back, if some of you were on those reaction shows we did right after that show, everybody was asking the question, well, what's next for Cody? Who's going to be his first big match coming out of WrestleMania 40? And we went one by one through the SmackDown roster at the time. Now, I want to say, I don't remember exactly, the draft came after that. There were not, as we remember, there were not a lot of people that were moved in the draft of any sort of huge significance when it came to the moves that were made. And that was one of the criticisms of the draft this year. But we went down the list of the SmackDown roster and said, well, I don't know about him. I don't know about him. Yeah, probably not him either. Maybe him too. But like there were no, oh yeah, that's 100% slam dunk. That's the next guy for Cody, and that guy may actually be someone in the future that's going to take the championship off of him. There was only one guy on that list, and that was Randy Orton, who, again, we're kind of still waiting on. We're waiting to get to this many months later. But that was the thing, right? Is that because of the way you have the brand split. And we know that Orton is now over on Raw for the time being, challenging Gunther for the World Heavyweight Championship. And you can say, well, you can just move people over, do it that way. But Orton has a reason. There was controversy at King of the Ring. They've at least planted that in to the story to say there's a reason Orton's kind of making this move over here for that. Yes, they can probably still poke holes in it and do all that stuff, but it makes sense, right? And so I think if you look at it from that standpoint, you don't have Cody with an opportunity to interact and or feud with people that he has the most connection to. He's had connections with Drew McIntyre, right? They've had matches this year. He can't have a championship feud where McIntyre is chasing his title. He can't have anything with CM Punk, the final two men in the Royal Rumble this year, right? He can't do that match with CM Punk just yet. He can't do anything again with Seth Rollins. He can't do what may have been an interesting kind of scenario with either a Jey Uso or a Sami Zayn, right? Given the fact that we've seen, these guys have their history in the past, but yet you can't have any of those guys challenge him either. You can't have anything with even Gunther, the new World Heavyweight Champion. Before that, right? You can't do Cody and Gunther, which we said we thought Gunther would be someone who could get drafted to SmackDown, and then you would have that program set in place for Cody to give it a little more oomph, right? That didn't happen. So really, take all those guys that Cody has connection to. That's not even mentioning the guys maybe there weren't a lot of connections to, like a breakout guy like Damian Priest. Look at what Bronson Reed's doing right now. Tell me you wouldn't be interested in seeing Bronson Reed bring the tsunami to try to take the championship from Cody Rhodes. Not saying it would happen, not saying there would be a strong possibility that he would even be considered to win the match, but it would at least make it a little more interesting. You can't do any of those feuds because of the brand split. Now, has WWE always held themselves to the brand split? No, and I always say, I'm like, to hell with a brand split. I don't care if they do it or not. But it's just one of those things where you have your own sort of built-in limitations to where there's not a lot for Cody to do outside of just the people who are on, the brand to be the challengers. And SmackDown's roster just, I don't think, really compares to what Raw's roster is right now. And I think you've kind of just got a lot of people who are on the way up on SmackDown versus Raw, where you've got a lot of people who are already established in those roles to where there is more believability that maybe one of these guys would beat Cody. You just have not had that yet. You don't have that long list on SmackDown. And so Orton is really the only big-time, huge match available because we know the history, we know the friendship, and we know that Randy Orton is going to strike as the Viper and the Legend Killer, and he is going to eventually hit an RKO out of nowhere on Cody Rhodes to set this thing in motion, right? And so that is exciting. That's something we can sink our teeth into, knowing that this is, as we said, on the Raw reaction show. Orton bringing up his quest to be a 15-time World Heavyweight Champion. If he can't get it against Gunther, Cody's going to be his only choice. So that adds something to the Cody title reign, right? But we do know, as I've said, the money is in the chase, right? And Cody's opportunity was going to be the one that he got at WrestleMania 40. To have the biggest possible moment, it was always going to be that. It was going to just sort of be impossible to replicate that anytime in the near future after WrestleMania 40. You only get one shot at that, and the opportunity only comes once in a lifetime. Some of you will know what I did there, and you'll appreciate it. But you get my point, is that this is kind of a situation where it wasn't set up for Cody to fail or feel like it's an underwhelming title reign. It's just kind of the nature of the money being in the chase. And again, I think when you're having these guys like this to Cody's level, the whole story was winning the title. There were always going to be the questions, well, what do you do after? And that is, a tale as old as time in professional wrestling. What do you do after, the babyface gets the huge win as the champion? How do you make everything feel just as big after that? And, that's always been an issue. Again, not in every case, but it's just always been an issue, especially when you have something like this. Cody's situation was so unique where it was going to be a challenge no matter what. And now, look, you've got the scenario. Let's call it what it is. Roman Reigns comes back. Roman feels like the biggest thing now on SmackDown, right? And people have talked about, is that a big problem for Cody Rhodes? I don't know if it's a big problem for Cody Rhodes, but it's just the facts, right? Roman Reigns is now the guy who people have been waiting and waiting to see for months and months to get himself back in the Bloodline story, which has still been the key story on SmackDown. Even with Cody there as the champion, it's still been about what's next with the Bloodline. That's been the thing that continues to hook people Although, let's not exactly just, discard Cody as though he is street trash, the name perhaps that was, pondered for the Judgment Day on Raw. But that's not what we're saying. The fact is, though, it's been the biggest hook storyline-wise. Cody is still the biggest draw, but the biggest hook storyline-wise has been the Bloodline. And so now you've got a scenario where Reigns is back, and now that adds a little more, oomph into that storyline, right? It adds a lot more excitement and interest into the Bloodline saga now moving forward, because now we see what happens when Jacob Fatu returns. Now we see if Solo is going to add anybody else to the mix. We see what happens when the Originals Bloodline gets back together, and you'll get to War Games, when The Rock comes back, all this stuff. There's a lot of things that now we're waiting for. The question is, what are we waiting for with Cody's story other than it feels like he's completed it, and now we're just waiting to see who's going to turn on him. And I feel like that's where we are. And that's where you're going to have this match with Kevin Owens. Does this turn Owens into a heel? We know the Randy Orton thing's coming. And the thing is, Randy Orton's going to get some cheers in that feud with Cody Rhodes. And I think that's kind of the slippery slope now that you're on if you really look at this, because people are going to cheer Randy Orton. There are going to be some people that cheer Kevin Owens. There are going to be some people that cheer The Rock when The Rock comes back. If that's where we're headed, WrestleMania 41, The Rock and Cody Rhodes. Rock's going to get some cheers too, no matter how big of a heel or how big of an ass he is. He's going to get that. And so it's a tough position for Cody. There's no question about it. I've seen some people say, look, is Cody going to be the next John Cena in terms of all of a sudden you're going to have a guy who's on the way up, which Cody was already there, but you know what we're talking about, finally getting to the very, very top of the company, and then you're going to start to put him in positions where the crowd is going to have to think a little bit. It's like, well, do we cheer this guy? I'm not sure I'm into this. Maybe we boo this guy. That's the thing, right? But again, I don't think that's on Cody. I think that is just really the nature of the scenario itself. And it's also the fact, like I said, of the brand split and just the limitations that you're working with. There, to me, are just not enough sort of top-level challengers right now on SmackDown that are heels. Not even just top challengers, right? It's like, again, Orton's a babyface right now. Owens is a babyface right now. Like, you only had a couple people really to choose from as true challengers for Cody, and to make you think at least at just a tiny, tiny bit, could they possibly switch the title here? There's just not a lot of those out there now. And you're waiting for Owens, you're waiting for Orton, you're waiting for the Reigns rematch, you're waiting for The Rock. There's not a lot of options elsewhere in terms of people that are ready for that spot right now. And so that is kind of, the challenge that I think Cody is working with right now in this title reign. And we'll see, how they continue to move forward with this. There's still a lot of things we've talked about, right? Is Cody going to hold that championship all the way to WrestleMania 41? Does Orton take it off of him before we get there? Or are they just kind of trying to keep things warm until The Rock comes back? And, look, I don't think The Rock's going to win the championship, but, that's the question, is what's next? And that's always been the thing. When you go back to these big title wins like you got at WrestleMania 40, what is next? Now we see, kind of how this continues to move forward, right? Because Cody has taken out really all the top challengers. But with Reigns back now, with the Orton turn coming, there's at least, I think, a lot of ways to heat this thing back up, even if it's felt like for some people a bit of a dip since that triumphant win at WrestleMania 40. But you guys let me know what you think about this Cody Rhodes title reign. What have you thought about it? Where do you think things head from here? I think we all know, like we said, we're going to get Owens in Berlin. You're going to get Orton after that, most likely. But what do you want to see more of from this Cody title run? What do you think are the things that have sort of held it back? I'm curious to know what you guys have thought about it thus far over the past, 4 months or so that we've had now in the Cody Rhodes Undisputed title reign. But appreciate you guys' feedback as always. Be sure to leave your comments below, and be sure to subscribe button, hit the like button on your way out, and let me know your thoughts on this Cody Rhodes WWE Undisputed title reign.